video, I'll be talking about the different antagonists from the crime genre and use them as inspiration for my characters in my trailer. Hope you enjoy. Walter White, aka Heisenberg. Walter White is a 50-year-old chemistry teacher who lives and works in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who after being diagnosed with stage 3A inoperable lung cancer, decides to manufacture crystal meth to pay for his treatment and also provide for his family if he were to ever pass away. He is portrayed as the protagonist, antagonist and anti-hero throughout the Breaking Bad series, and he's the father of his disabled son, Walt Jr., and husband of the pregnant Skylar White. Walter White starts cooking crystal methamphetamine with his partner Jesse Pinkman and former student of his. Walt's scientific knowledge and perfectionism lead him to create the most sought-after crystal meth in New Mexico, codenamed Blue Sky, due to its light blue colour. Walter White started out as a manufacturer, leaving it to Jesse to sort out all the violence that followed the drug trade. However, as Jesse wasn't effective enough, Walt became increasingly violent and he becomes the most feared drug lord. And this is why I'm choosing him as the antagonist to research into. I will analyse the contrast between Walter White in the first season and the last season. Walter White in season 1 begins as a protagonist, a family man who provides for his family and works 2 jobs, as a teacher and car washer. After going on a ride along with his DEA agent brother-in-law Hank, he spots Jesse escaping from a raid. Walt then meets Jesse and the pair buy an RV to become a mobile meth lab in which they can both cook crystal meth in. Walt and Jesse first sell to Crazy 8, who then uses violence to score free meth and completely cons them out of business, until Walt gasses them with phosphine gas, killing Crazy 8's friend Emilio and leaving Crazy 8 sick. Upon seeing that Crazy 8 is still alive, they keep him hostage in Jesse's basement. Locked to a pole by a bike lock, the two flip a coin and Jesse has to dispose of Emilio's body, and Walt has to kill Crazy 8. Walt begins to write down morals on what is wrong and what is right about killing Crazy 8, showing that Walt was no cold-blooded killer and definitely wasn't a drug lord in season 1 compared to Walt in season 5. Walter is definitely different, and he eventually chokes Crazy 8 upon realising that he was planning to kill Walt when he was released. Walt and Jesse then deal with Tuco, Walt's second buyer and customer for a while, until Walt and Jesse get caught up in a mess, and Walt eventually detonates a concealed explosive prompting Tuco to pay, and Walt is seen as an anti-hero as he rescues Jesse as such after Tuco had beaten him and left him bloody and unconscious. Walt and Jesse promise a huge deal amount of Blue Sky to Tuco, and the pair break into a warehouse to steal methylamine, a key component for the production of crystal meth. They complete the deal, but Jesse and Walt are increasingly worried about Tuco's violent ways, as Jesse has spotted his black SUV going up and down his street. They each come up with a way to kill him, and Walt suggests ricin, but before they can unfold his plan, they're kidnapped by Tuco, and Walt and Jesse escape from Tuco's desert shack, in which they were held hostage in, along with Tuco's uncle, who was also paralysed. Hank, hot on the heels of Jesse, having been informed about Jesse's dealing marijuana to Walt, which was a lie which was used to cover up his meth-dealing business, is confronted by Tuco, and a brief firefight ensues, leaving Tuco dead and Walt and Jesse escaping, leaving them to continue with their lives and either continue the business or cut their ties loose. But Walt and Jesse, which are both sort of start to turn around their lives financially, they are getting even more hungry for the money and the thrill of being meth dealers. Walter White in season 5 is very different, as he goes from anti-hero to antagonist, and it's clear to see how he's become an authoritative figure in the drug industry, killing most people he has worked with, like Gus, and also has his wife Skylar in on the crystal meth business, although she's very reluctant to. Jesse is at war with Todd, someone who keeps Walt and Jesse and helps them make meth in strangers' houses, as he and his team and his uncle work as cleaners, which go around to other houses and work in them. So it's very good for the business because they can go to different houses, and also it's also a sort of mobile meth lab, similar to what we saw with the RV. Todd becomes more involved and kills an innocent, unarmed child, with Jesse not being very happy about this and doesn't agree with it. Him and Jesse have a huge falling out. Jesse's girlfriend, Andrea, is then killed by Todd and his gang, as they become heavily involved with Walt and Jesse's business. Walt and Jesse part ways, with Walt moving away briefly and eventually coming back. Skylar, Hank and Walt Jr. all know about Walt's secret life, and Hank is tasked with tracking down Walt, and eventually it's Walt who is spared death, as Hank is killed, and so is Todd's uncle and his gang. Lydia, who is involved with Todd and his business, was poisoned with ricin, expecting Walt to be dead. Walt calls her on Todd's phone, and hearing her sick, he explains that everyone is dead and leaves her to die. Walt then, with Jesse for one last time, asks Jesse to kill him, but Jesse notices that Walt will die anyway and escapes the meth lab. Walt then touches one of the tanks in the meth lab and passes away peacefully, knowing that his family is in financially stable condition and physically well. The police arrive, discovering Walt's dead body. Walt ironically died in the place where he felt most alive, a meth lab. It's clear to see that Walt has gone from a normal, overqualified chemistry teacher to a drug lord who has killed countless criminals and is a compulsive liar and at fault for his own death, in a way. He went on to extreme lengths to ensure that his family were left in a financially stable condition, and also done it in the evilest way possible. Walter White would be the perfect antagonist, as I have been inspired by the Walt of seasons 3, 4 and 5, the cold-blooded killer and mass methamphetamine manufacturer. He is the perfect antagonist, a once honest hard-working man turned into a crime lord by money, violence and the urge to live his life in the short time that he believed that he had. He has really unlocked his full potential as a massive manufacturer of crystal methamphetamine, and it's really clear to say that his boring old job had really activated this sort of lifestyle because he really started to enjoy what he was doing. The Joker. The Joker is such a great character research because he's one of the, if not the most evil, psychotic, cold-blooded killer of the crime genre. He's the antagonist in The Dark Knight Rises and the most loved antagonist in the comic series of Batman. He's extremely different to Batman. He's a small, skinny and an average compared to Bruce Wayne's large, tall physique. The Joker also dresses in bright colours such as green and purple, and he either wears makeup or has bleached skin in any portrayal of the Joker. He traditionally has green hair and red lips, and has a cliché clown face. Although this clown isn't for any sort of amusement, he's extremely intelligent and knows how to manipulate people, and his main goal is to instill anarchy into Gotham. By any means necessary, he does this. He's very outgoing and isn't afraid to have his name mentioned in media outlets. With Batman typically in the shadows, the Joker is a typically more talkative character and very intimidating and extremely psychotic. He's been portrayed in many various ways. In the 1960s, Cesar Romero portrayed the character as a campy, funny, strangely psychotic yet harmless killer. In 1989, Jack Nicholson played the character in a somewhat human way and fashionable to the comics, however upped the killer aspect of the Joker, as was the quick temper. He also possessed bleached skin in the film and received Golden Globe nominations for his performance. In the early to mid-1990s, Mark Hamill voiced the character as an ice-cold, cruel, vastly different character from Nicholson's interpretation of the Joker. In 2008, however, the Joker was taken in a completely different direction he'd never been taken in before. In The Dark Knight, the late Heath Ledger portrayed the Joker as a completely psychotic and demonic killer, a sort of Nietzschean Superman with no moral attachment towards anybody but sees Batman as a true value to himself. Any humour that the character shows is sardonic and cruel. Ledger's Joker was a personification of disregard and chaos, and his primary goal seems to be to prove people that in dire situations are just as sick and horrible as he is. This Joker's most frightening and dangerous asset of all is his intelligence. The Joker is such a unique character, and he's been portrayed in so many different ways, meaning that I could take inspiration from any character or actor that he's been played by, because I can take inspiration from the Joker because he's one of the scariest, most frightening antagonists of the crime genre. With his evil genius outlook on Gotham, it's clear to say that Batman has met his match, and whenever the two meet, no matter what the interpretation of him, he's still frighteningly scary, and I could take any inspiration from either the 1960s, 1989 or even 2008. Every single Joker is so scary, and any future Joker will have to follow in the footsteps of these famous actors, and they've portrayed him so well, and it's no wonder that they've got so many great nominations for Golden Globes and other things like that. The Godfather. Don Vito Corleone was born in a small Sicilian village of Corleone to Antonio Andolini. His father was murdered by a Sicilian mafia boss named Don Ciso. His older brother, Paolo, was also murdered after he swore revenge against the man who killed his father, and his brother died on the same day of his father's funeral, the ultimate insult and the ultimate murder. Vito was about to be taken away by Ciso's henchmen until Vito's mother begged for forgiveness to Ciso, but they refused after knowing that he would seek revenge when he was older. She put a knife to Ciso's throat and let Vito escape at the expense of her own life. He was later smuggled away and took refuge in America, and he was named Vito Corleone after the immigrants had noticed that he was from Corleone. He was adopted by the Abandando family, and he befriended Genco Abandando, who became a brother to him. He rose up the ranks and started his own family and created his own empire that was fueled on drug, trade, robbing and all other types of criminal activity. In the film The Godfather, he is seen as an older man whom is passing on the torch to Michael, his son. He doesn't exactly come across as evil, but you can see clearly that he is one of the negotiators rather than the one for violence. Though that he might be due to his age, he very sort of acts differently than you would expect than a crime empire lord, because like Walter White, he's very heavily involved in violence, but he isn't. Although he is very evil, he still has that anti-hero essence about him, but the primary reason why I chose to use him as an antagonist inspiration is because he's really climbed up the ranks and become a don of a massive crime empire, and guides the future dons and subalterns to where he is, and advises Michael, his own son, of how his enemies will move around him, and this shows how experienced he is in running a crime empire, and he's the perfect character to research into, because he's honourable, lovable, and a dedicated family man, don by name, don by nature. Henry Hill, James Conway and Tommy DeVito. These three characters are all partners in the 1990s crime film Goodfellas. Henry Hill grew up in a poor working class family in Brooklyn of Sicilian and Irish descent. From an early age he admired the mafia lifestyle of the Lucchese family across the street. He began to get involved, bunking off of school and indulging into the criminal lifestyle of the Lucchese family, and he'd earned the respect of the family after he didn't speak to the police at all when he had been arrested. James Conway saw great potential in him because of this. The criminal phase of his life became when he teamed up with James Conway and Tommy DeVito. The film Goodfellas portrayed the three as criminals who were interested in money and didn't really kill as often as you'd expect, although they still did murder a lot of people because of this. The three were all interested in stealing stolen goods and other ways of making money, and they worked extremely effectively together. Hill was very humble, had cared for his family, and although he was almost involved in an affair, he was very loyal until he became an informant for the FBI, in which he ratted out many of his friends and family. He suffered with cocaine abuse and had a long spell in prison until he was placed in witness protection. Tommy DeVito was eventually killed by the elder members of the Lucchese family, as he was murdering countless people and his behaviour was getting even more reckless. Tommy was a very violent man, with a very short temper and surprisingly threatening to those around him despite his short size. James Conway, however, was very intelligent when it came to stealing, and all sorts of drug trade. He was the most experienced out of the three, and he was associated with the two of them, and he knew Henry from when he was in his teens. The three were great partners in crime, and they all thought that they might have had a bitter twisted end, and they all cared about one another, as James Conway was extremely upset with DeVito's death. The three cared about each other, and they have all inspired me, as I could really use the main characters for my trailer and show how their personalities differ and how they are so tactically brilliant at masterminding their criminal objectives. These three characters are great Antagonist Research because I have really been inspired by them individually and also as a collective, because they're so different when they're apart, but then when they're together they're such a great unit in terms of crime, and it can really influence my crime trailer. Neil McCauley. Neil McCauley is the main antagonist of the 1995 crime film Heat. Neil is a skilled criminal with a history of successful heists and bank robberies under his belt. However, he has met his match in Lieutenant Vincent Hanna, a detective who will stop at nothing to put an end to McCauley's and his team's efforts of robbing an LA bank. Neil seeks to find love, and for one last score. He has a troubled personal life similar to that of Hannah. He is sinking one last retirement score, and eventually tries to rob a midtown bank in LA, along with his team of professional criminals. However, Neil disobeys the one rule that he was taught by his mentor many years before. Never have anything in your life that you can't walk out on in 30 seconds flat, if you spot the heat coming around the corner. He falls in love, setting up the scene for a suspenseful finish in which Neil was shot several times by Hannah. Hannah confronts the man that he shares the most similarities with in his life, and even though this is his enemy, the two still embrace and reflect together before Neil dies, knowing that he would not have to go to prison. The reason why I chose Neil McCauley is because he is so similar to Heat's main protagonist, Lieutenant Vincent Hanna. The two are so similar and they have a very different connection. The ending is emotional and the antagonist still loses however. But what I do love about Neil is that he isn't afraid of death, and he is extremely committed and determined, and he's very similar to the other criminals in this list. Much like the other antagonists in this video, I really love De Niro's character, as he's so organised and it makes well for dramatic effect, as you can see how well put together the heists are, and he was such a realistic character, and this is why I've been inspired by him the most. He's an average guy on the surface, but deep down, he's a well organised criminal who knows how to steal and organise his own experienced crew. He is such a great character to analyse, and he's the one character that I will take the most inspiration from the most. Not because he's the best character, but because he's so different, and he's exactly what I want to create in my final film trailer. Thank you for watching my research into the crime genre's most loved antagonists, and make sure that you watch my protagonist research video if you haven't seen it already.